I've wanted to add another video to this series, and I had a few ideas, but I really also wanted to do this idea because I think it's something I myself am still processing even right now. And you, as like an individual or like as a human being, what we're taught about our social interactions and all these social roles that are given to us and are given to other people around us, it always goes back to the home. It always goes back to how you are brought up. It always goes back to your developmental environment and who was there or who wasn't there and what uh influences were there or not. And nowadays more than ever, it's literally such a hot topic of debate about what a father does in the home, about what a father's role in the home. And you ask the people on the like politically across the spectrum, you'll find so many different interpretations of what a father does or what a father should do. And it's weird to me that the people who advocate for more births don't advocate for what exactly it would even mean to be a parent, let alone even a father. And this is a video about my life and my experiences. So, to look at my relationship with my father, he like he's like the epitome of a boomer. Like he literally was born in the 1940s. That still trips me out till now. He was literally born in the 1940s. The age gap between him and my youngest brother are literally like it's like literally 50 years, right? But because he was from that environment, literally grew up during like the colonial period. So did my mom as well. It's sort of like a time capsule. You can see the environment that they were around and the people who uh, had the influence and the lessons that crystallized in their minds. And because my grandfather died a year before I was born, or at least my father's father, yeah, I never really knew him at all. I didn't really. I've only seen like two pictures of him. I've read one of his diaries, and the rest I've just heard from like my uncles and my parents about him. So, as well as given how old he is, it's like he's not just my father, but then also like my grandfather. My other grandfather, my mother's father, died when I was 2 years old. So literally, I didn't have any grandparents except my father's mother, who I don't remember much of, and she died when I was 10 years old. Then my mother's mother died when like my eldest brother was like 2 years old. So I've only seen like pictures of most of them. Like like my grandmother and my mother look like completely the same. Like obviously, yeah, genetics works like that, but it's still it's kind of it's cool, but it's also kind of eerie. I don't know if that makes sense. Because my father also looks a lot like his mother as well. Because I've actually seen her, but I haven't really seen like really good pictures of my grandfather. Though, my parents often like to tell me that I remind them of him, which I guess is good enough for me. So, my dad has been like at times like really incredibly overbearing, then at the same time a very sink or swim attitude. Like the older we've gotten, it's just been more like, sink or swim, but we'll still accept you over here. And it's really, it's really had me questioning, what exactly would it look like to even be a father myself, right? Because I personally don't like violence. I really don't. And the fact that, you know, my father was able to rationalize that kind of violence on his kids, heck, both of them, right? But again, it was done to them when they were kids by their own parents, by the teachers as well. And, what my father loves to remind us is that, if you get beaten at school by a teacher and you go home and tell your parents will beat you for being beaten by the teacher. They don't want to know. They don't care why. That's just it. You can see how that replicates such a vicious cycle, right? Immediately. And it's not even like really, you know, I don't necessarily want to paint him as like this like abusive monster or whatever, but hitting your children is abuse, right? It is like full stop. You wouldn't do that to another adult. What the hell emboldens you to do it to a child? And yet outside of that, like he, both my parents have provided for us immensely, you know, despite that. They've provided emotionally, financially. If there's anything we want to do, we just literally have to ask them, whatever it is, right? And funny enough, they do understand, they boom mentality is so weird. Like there's some I don't even know. Like, they do value children. They don't look at like they know that children don't ask to be born, right? They know that very well. They still decided to have them, but they said, and they still decided to put all these weird expectations on them, but they understand that children don't ask to be born. So, some parts of them, I think they themselves have gone through this maturing phase. And I've said before, parents are the children. So it's in a way, it's like we ourselves are raising them. This process of growing up and, realizing, oh, okay, yeah, you know, maybe life isn't just this like narrow path you have to take. But even with that, seeing how important he is to our family and to our extended family, it's something I don't take for granted. As much as I didn't ask to be here, as much as I, the, me rationalizing that he hit us growing up, both of them, and they eventually dropped it, right? And sometimes they like to pretend that they didn't even, and that's the funny thing. Right now, if I go ask them, they'll be like, oh, this is just how it is, or like they'll completely deflect, or you just act like, especially my mom will just act like it didn't even happen. And I'm like, oh well, yeah, no, yeah, thanks, brilliant. After the fact, just thanks for that, and it's not so much that I really forgive such actions as much as, this really is a stupid place to make people rationalize in their minds that violence against their own children is like a moral, it's a moral duty, you know, to bring a child here and abuse them as you see fit, right? And then they draw the lines so arbitrarily, right? Or at which types of abuses are good and moral and which ones are not, even though none of them are to your children. Literally none, right? This has been like established scientific observations for like decades now, and yet somehow it continues. Because I realized a lot of people they don't care about rationality. Okay, yes, this world is it's a messed up ass place, and a lot of things are really irrational. It's designed to make you insane, to drive you insane. But human beings are by default pattern seeking organisms. We seek them. Our brain seeks them all the time, and it's doing it right now, but it's focusing on what you want to focus on right now. But literally, you know, it maps out literally everything you can see to make your reality somewhat perceivable. And I listened to Kendrick's new album, and he has a song called Father Time, which is him talking about his daddy issues. And it sounds like an absolute mirror to my own father. Like some things are like word for word. It's so crazy because, you know, there's a verse he talks about his grandmother dying, and his father went back to work like literally as soon as he could after her death. And then Kendrick asked his father why he was able to get over it so soon. And like I think his dad said, I'll put the lyrics up. Yeah, he said that, yeah, that's just life. You know, that's how it is. You just got to keep going, and you just got to keep making your money in some way. You know, listen to this song if you haven't. Like, it really hit home. Like, it hit several different homes at the same time. And, you know, to me, I've reached a point where I don't have either daddy issues or necessarily mommy issues. I just have a me issue, if that makes sense. Because especially, you know, especially when I said about how they would take the teacher's word as law. Like, I had this particularly abusive piece of shit teacher in the when I was in grade 4. Like, he was literally mentally and emotionally abusive to particularly me. I'll never forget that fucking piece of shit. And till now, I still can't remember like what the hell I was doing wrong. But that to me, I was literally able to process it and see that it literally wasn't me. It was literally him. Because the class before that, like the year before that, I was, yeah, you know, I like if I made mistakes, I know which mistakes I made. That year, it's almost like a blank to me because I don't like remembering it at all. I especially hated how like my parents would just, you know, take his word for what I was doing, and like, you know, they wouldn't. I literally had nobody believing me when I was. I don't even think I really talked about how, like, what a piece of shit he was. And then the year after that, I was okay. The year after that, I like literally had no issues in class at all. You know, that's the only year that seems to stick out, and it was the only year I had a literal psychopath for a teacher. That's one person I wouldn't mind punching their face in, and I know I can do it right now because like they were like 5 foot 2 or something when I was a child, right? They were barely taller than me. I'm not saying that being that short is a bad thing, but like, if you want to, that was really the definition of a Napoleon syndrome or Napoleon complex. But at the same time, I really don't feel the need to do that. It's not gonna really fix anything. It's not gonna really make me any better of a person than I already am. And the crazy thing is, I've never even told my parents about it. It's like, it's one of those things where they'll easily shut it down, like, oh, that happened in the past or blah blah blah. Like, they just keep moving on. They just because I have at the same time they were dealing with a lot of to hear news about like the neighboring village being displaced by the British for them to have agricultural land or whatever. Like, to grow up in that kind of environment would not have been good for any child, for any person, really.
Freud said, for example, that no one could be a man unless his father had died. And Jung said, yes, but that death can take place symbolically. Okay, so there's that part of the idea. And then another part of the idea is, one of the times in your life when you actually realize that you're an individual is when you'll go and ask your parents something and you'll realize they actually don't know any more about what you should do than you do. And that sucks. And that's partly why people are often willing to maintain a tyrant-slave relationship with their father. It's like, on the one hand, you have to be inferior in a relationship like that. You've always got the judge watching you. But on the other hand, there's always someone who knows what to do. There's always someone standing between you and the unknown that you can go ask, what should I do? Well, at some point, you'll realize that the reason you can't ask that anymore is because they actually don't know any more than you do. And then that's a pain. Like, that is a symbolic death. And that's also when you establish a more individual relationship with your parents. It's at that point that you could conceivably start taking care of them instead of the reverse.
And I'm not justifying their behaviors. I look for an explanation as to why, but at the same time, there's things that are not up for debate, in my opinion. And, reconciling those developmental issues I had with, who my father is. People, I guess, change. That maybe there's change. I don't know. I think there's experience and exposure. People can experience different things. They can be exposed to different things, and that gives you a more well-rounded outlook on life. So, I think they, like my parents, especially my father, learned that, for us to really be ourselves, we have to make our own mistakes. You can't bring a child into this world and expect them to be a carbon copy of you, and more so to, it's like you want them to succeed in the outside world, but then you want to curate their own world for them, and they somehow have to move between both worlds just flawlessly or something, and it sets a lot of people up incredibly for failure. I don't know what kind of parenting style would be the best. It may be the one that's, you accept your child for who they are, even if even if they're already there, you accept them for who they are, you provide for them since you brought them here. And it's, it's something I realize that he's had to, even right now, dealing with, there's no age where you stop dealing with traumatic experiences, because there's always new ones. There's always more, and there's always worse ones that you would never even imagine. And now for me, it's like I have to define myself outside of his shadow. And he's still a very important part of my life and how I try to define myself. And I know that this isn't something that a lot of people have. Like, a lot of people have incredibly pieces, like massive pieces of shit for fathers. Absolute pieces of shit for fathers, And they still manage to become such great people, to be honest, like really great people despite that. Other people, their fathers were like literally absent from the home, which unless they're dead or like in jail for some reason, like otherwise unavailable from their child's heck, could even be a divorce thing where the mom just keeps the dad away and poisons the child's mind about the father. Those kinds of reasons I can say are pretty decent excuses. But I don't know how often it is. There's people who are just really shitty fathers, even if they're in a marriage or it's like a shared custody or whatever. They're just pieces of garbage, right? And I don't know how I would have turned out if my father wasn't around. Because I've seen it in several of my friends, either having no father at all, right? Maybe their father's dead, or their father's like really, really, like not just physically, but like mentally abusive as well, emotionally as well. And to me, to define myself, I really have to step out of many different shadows, right? And shadows I don't even realize exist. My father's is one of them. And to me, it's like it's a pretty decent closure as to why I know I'll never have kids, or I never want kids either. Because your child's sense of identity and personality depends on how good of a father you really are, how good of a parent you really are. And it's next to impossible to give that child a sense of identity and expect them to go through this life in as flawless a manner as possible. Because there's things that they will never be ready for, and there's things that you as a father will never be able to solve. You will never be able to solve that problem for them. I hope it's kind of made sense, because I'm just trying to collect my thoughts about it. It's something that it's not difficult to talk about. It's just difficult to fully encapsulate, like the effect, of fathers, really. I would say that, especially in the modern discourse, and how like the father in the home is already pathologized and they need to be removed and if a man's abusive to his wife or his kids, yeah, fuck him off, like without a fucking doubt, right? But the man being a father to his children, I don't think that's abuse. And we could say, yes, as antinatalists, that it is really, you're literally imposing abuse on your child that they will experience later on, like guaranteed, the guaranteed. But this is reality. This is what we live in, and you know, we have to adapt to these things as best as we can. And if that's the case, we can adapt ourselves to be better human beings to one another. I think that's very possible. You know, I guess it's really only on us to fully break those cycles of trauma. And you know, the best parent is the parent that never was. The best father is a father that never was. Or you know, you basically now just have to raise your own inner child. And that's quite possible. That's very, very possible, you know. But yeah, I hope this has made sense. I hope this is you gotten something from it. You know, just like I always like hearing your thoughts about it, and you know, maybe even your own to what you want to share. You know, your own experiences, your own outlooks on it. You know, feel free to comment.